Hi friends, it's Katie, back again. English language learning, past, present, and future. So this is my presentation. I did not get to do an interview, unfortunately. I really tried. So instead I did a research presentation and a research project. But in order to accommodate for not having an interview, my project is also a bit longer. So just keep that in mind. If you get bored, it's okay. It's really okay. You won't hurt my feelings. So this is English language learning, past, present, and future. So we're going to look at where the beginnings of language learning took off, where it kind of is in today's terms, and where it's going in the future, or I guess also where it needs to go. Alrighty, here we go. So the ancient Greeks were really into words. They were the first peoples to start categorizing words into categories. So instead of saying that everything is just a word, they were the first ones to say that this is a verb, and this is an adverb, and this is a noun, and this is a pronoun, and all of those parts of speech, and they started with grammar rules as well. So putting languages in order was really what the first language learning technique was. So in the Middle Ages, language education was used to translate great works of text, so that's like the Bible. So think of a monk sitting up there in his tower, scribbling away, copying down the Bible. So I'll finish this drawing and then I will say something more. Just give me a second. Okay, so this is called direct translation. It's taking a text in a different language and transcribing that into a different language, word for word for word for word. Unfortunately, this method, although useful because it's taking one thing and translating it, it was only reserved for a select few because a lot of people just didn't know how to read back then, and a lot of people just didn't have access to either education or educational materials, so books and slates and chalk and stuff like that. They didn't have that kind of stuff yet. So effective, but not for the masses. All right, fast forward a couple years, and I'm going to turn my note page so I know what I'm doing. And you get behaviorism. So this is people like B.F. Skinner, Pavlov. That looks like I spelt that wrong, but I'm not sure why, because I think it's spelled right. So when I think of behaviorism, I think of a dog. I think of an animal, because when I think of how I trained my dog and my cats, because I train them too, it's operant conditioning. It's using some sort of reward to get a desired result. So principles of behaviorism suggest that students are a blank slate to be filled with knowledge as directed by a teacher. So what you see in behaviorism education is you see students sitting in nice, neat rows like this, with their legs crossed and their mouths absolutely zipped. And you have the teacher up here giving their lesson. So that's a behaviorism classroom, kind of in a nutshell. For language learners, this means memorization, drill and skill, all about getting the correct response. So it's very set for context. You're learning proper English, or what is deemed proper English. So instead of saying like, hey, what's up? You'd say, hello, how is your day? How are you doing? Stuff like that. Very set to context, like I said, so it's not really something you can take out of the classroom. So for ELL students who are trying to assimilate to a new culture, not always effective. It's about getting it right rather than the exploration and expansion of learning. So it's criticized for being like too rigid. And it doesn't offer much interaction with other cultures and other languages, which is kind of a bummer. It has a place because we still see behaviorism in the classroom today, but it has less of a place today than it used to. All right, communicative and discourse methods. So these methods are built on the idea of communicative competency, which we've talked about. So this is comprehensible input, and I thought I wrote that down somewhere, but now I don't see it. Oh well. Ooh, it's called improv, comprehensible input. Sorry about that. Okay, so it's excuse me. It's about understanding what is being said. So this person is talking, and this person is listening. He's got a big smile on his face because he understands what's being said to him. Now, when this person that was listening is talking, he also wants this person who is listening to be smiling because they understand what's being heard. That is what comprehensible input is all about. It's about being able to understand both the speaker and the listener. It also believes that language should take a more natural approach rather than this highly structured, highly rigid curriculum that behaviorism suggests. So rather than getting things perfect, it's more about conveying meaning. My phone just buzzed. What else was I going to say? Oh, it also promotes interaction with the language in as many forms, as many times as possible. So this is the classrooms where you really want to be talking a lot, be hearing a lot of conversations. That's what this is about. All right, so we're gonna take a little pause and you guys get to see my wonderful drawing skills. We're gonna look at where education has been and where it kind of is today. So first we have the direct translation method. With the guy in the tower, that is the word, right? Tower? I think it is. Who's transcribing exactly what he sees on the page. After that, you get behaviorism. Oops, that's a B, not a D. And we're going to draw a dog. Because behaviorism is training. Then after that, you get communicative competencies, which is about speaking and listening. What did I just do? There you go. Speaking and listening and being understood. We need a little ear there because also about listening. Okay, in today's world, and I guess I'll change my pen color, we have a growing number of ELL students in the classroom. We also have increased achievement gaps. So students are not... I'm recording! Okay. Sorry, my parents just came home from the store. So we also have achievement gaps where students are not exactly measuring up due to different things. And we also have progressive education strategies. Which basically means teacher-centered, or not teacher-centered, sorry, the opposite of that, child-centered. So you really want the kids to get more control over their education. That's what progressive education is. So with all of that in mind, let's continue. All right, so based on a study conducted in 2009-2010, it was published in 2014, ELL students are both starting and ending at lower achievement rates than their general education peers. So we're going to go ahead and draw this out. So this is time. I keep having technical difficulties, I'm sorry. Time, and this is achievement. Okay. So we're going to do blue. So general education students are starting somewhere in the middle, right? In the middle of the year, they know a lot, but they don't know everything, because nobody knows everything. And then they start increasing and increasing and increasing. By the end of the year, they know a lot, and just pretend that that's a straight line and not some wonky, weird line that I drew. ELL students, on the other hand, I should use a not so light color, and I'm going to fix that E because it does not look like an E. And we do red. So ELL students are starting off somewhere over here because they don't really know the language, which is not their fault at all because they just don't know the language. I'm not saying that to be facetious either, like please know that. Okay, so at first they start skyrocketing. They're learning at incredible rates. And then they sort of plateau and they start learning at the same rates as everybody else. So by the end of the year, they have not caught up to their peers. They're still below. So this achievement gap persists throughout the grade levels. It's something that no matter what these ELL students do, they just can't catch up. So with the push for grade level standards and achievement for these ELL students, and I really need to start saying a different word because achievement is getting boring. Instead of looking at only the language or only the content, we now have sheltered instruction learning. So what sheltered instruction education is it's a bridge between learning in exclusively content area and exclusively language area. So what happens here is that the language, so you have language and content. The content is enriching the language. The language is enriching the content. So what that means is that while students are learning the content, they're also learning the language. While they're learning the language, that's helping them learn the content. So they're learning both at the same time. So it also believes that students bring a host of knowledge with them into the classroom. So it relies on a lot of their previous experiences, unlike behaviorism that believes that the teacher is the only one that can give the students knowledge. It's also about bringing content area standards to ELL students in a way that's understandable for them. So it is not watered down. It's not watered down at all. It is the same standards, the same curriculum. It's just delivered in a way that ELL students can identify and can understand. So SIOP and SEDAI are two main examples of this. They're things that we've covered in class, so I'm not going to go over it. But things like, increasing time, using clear examples, paying attention to the content that you're bringing into the classroom, stuff like that. Okay, so an article published in 2011 lists 4 barriers to teaching ELL students that mainstream teachers may face. So this is things not in a sheltered instruction classroom, but in a strictly content area classroom that mainstream teachers don't really understand. It's a deficit for them. It's something we need to fix. So one is low understanding of the role of literacy in home culture. So basically what that means is that mainstream teachers don't really understand or are claiming to not understand what literacy means to a home culture. So speaking, listening, reading, writing, and thinking. So all of those things, how is that structured in a different language? They're also the barrier of the inability to differentiate instruction because it takes a lot of time. So how do you accommodate for every single one of your students? It's something that has to be done. Also undervaluing, classroom collaboration, so the use of groups, the use of students to teach other students, and low understanding of how to assess diverse populations because things like population bias exist, unfortunately. So how do we compensate for all this stuff? So in this same article, they listed a bunch of, trying to think of the word and I feel like I can't say it right. A lot of things to kind of compensate for these deficits. So to compensate for low understanding of the role of literacy in home cultures, excuse me, connect with your students, connect with your families, and try to bring their voice into the classroom. So an example of this is that, like a cultural day, have a day where you can celebrate students' cultures. In Hawaii, we would call it a ho'olalea. A big cultural celebration. You bring food, you bring dance, you bring a whole bunch of stuff, and just learn about the culture, about all kinds of different cultures. So to accommodate for inability to differentiate in structure, take time to understand each learner's needs and work to accommodate them. So make sure you're accommodating for your visual learners, for your auditorial learners, for your kinesthetic learners, all of those things. Make sure that every kid gets a voice in the classroom. Undervaluing classroom collaboration. So you want to realize that students learn a lot, often the most, from their peers, not you standing in front of a classroom, and use it to your advantage. Grouping, student learning, peer learning, peer tutoring, all of those kind of things. Especially for ELLs, it's very important for them to connect with other students from different backgrounds and with the same background as them. And low understanding of how to assess diverse populations. Be aware of testing bias and consider delivering assignments or assessments with different methods. So for instance, if you have a child who can read English very well but can't speak it very well, or understand it when it's auditory stimulation, is that the word? I feel like I'm using all the wrong words right now. Stimulus? Stimulus. Auditory stimulus. Have them write the test out if they need to, or have it, instead of a verbal test, write it all down for them. Give them extra time. Include pictures, include a word bank, stuff like that. All right, so in response to having a larger ELL population, and also realizing that these students have challenges, unique challenges that many students don't face in the classroom, a lot of states are implementing ELL requirements for teacher preparation programs. So things like mandatory ELL endorsements, mandatory classes for teachers so that they can help their ELL students. And it's all with the idea that we want to get every single student succeeding. So a study conducted in 2015-2016, I believe this was in Massachusetts, but I could be remembering that wrong. And it was also published in 2020, so this is like as current as it gets. So this study analyzed how emerging teachers felt about these classes, so these ELL teacher preparation classes, and how confident they were with applying what they had learned in these classrooms to their mainstream classrooms. So it's about what they learned and how they chose to implement these things in their classroom or not implement them in their classroom, which is what you're going to see. So although teachers gained, although teachers gained many best practice skills for teaching ELL students, they were not comfortable with bringing these skills into their classroom, which to me is ridiculous because you're learning these skills, you might as well use them. Okay, so what this all shows is that teachers know the best practices, but they're not willing to use the best practices. And this is an extreme deficit because, again, if you're going to learn these skills to help your students, you sure better be using them and doing them. Main reasons that teachers cited for not wanting to do these things feeling that language practices did not apply to their content area, and I feel like I've said this many times over this presentation, literacy is not just about reading and writing. Literacy is reading, writing, speaking, listening, and thinking. No matter what discipline you're in, math, science, history, social studies, English, it all applies. So it's never not your content area. They also cited lacking resources and time to accommodate students, which is understandable because, yeah, it takes a lot of time to build a lesson that accommodates all of your students. Believe me, I know. And also perceiving contradictions between these practices, so accommodating ELLs and diverse student populations, and school policies and district policies that seemed to exclude them. So you have on the one hand policies that are like, yes, let's bring these ELLs up to speed, let's get everybody on the same playing field. And you also have policies on the other hand that are like, sink or swim. If you know the language, if you know the lingo, you survive, and if you don't, well, too bad. So this, where's my cursor? There we go. This article was titled, Not My Job. And that kind of blew me away because that's something I hear in my job all the time. Not my kids, not my job, not my responsibility. And what both me and my boss say is that it is always your job. If a kid needs you, they need you. So bottom line, and I'm going to write this in big, bold red, it's your job. Please do it. Please do it well. We're hired as competent teachers, so please hold yourself to that standard. I'm not going to read this all to you, but basically this is my slide of saying it's totally your job, guys. We have an obligation as teachers to provide an equitable education to all of our students. That means supporting them in whatever ways that we can. Unless if it is a legal thing that is barring you from doing your job, it is your job. So, despite advances being made in ELL education and education of diverse populations, it's not enough. So we're kind of going to go over what accommodations there have been made and what responses there have been to different things. All right, so ELL students are a growing population in public schools. So let's accommodate them. Let's get them up to speed. Let's provide them with English language learning. Let's give them the tools and skills that they need to survive. Statistics show that this growing population is underperforming compared to their grade level peers. That ain't good. So this is where curriculum instruction comes in. Instruction. Instruction. I'm losing my mind, I swear. Okay, so this is where curriculum instruction comes in, getting them up to the standards, getting them up to their grade level peer levels that they're not quite reaching. So in response to all of this curriculum instruction, many teacher education programs now include mandated ELL requirements. So we're giving teachers the skills and tools that they need in order to teach ELL students. And this is where it gets a little hairy and where I say, oh no. Teachers feel that best practices for teaching ELL students, though important, are not realistic for their classrooms. So what I kept seeing in that study is teachers who are saying, well, in the real world, they don't have all of these accommodations, so they need to function in the real world, and thus I'm not going to give them all of these accommodations. What are you creating? You're creating a culture where your students don't succeed, and that's not great. So what happens now? So the same study that looked at teacher preparation programs also looked at monolingual ideologies in the United States. So monolingual language ideologies basically means that in the United States, you have to speak English to survive. If you do not speak English, you're not going to get ahead. I don't necessarily believe that, but it's the way that the United States is structured. So the emphasis on ELL students' assimilation in school, both socially and academically, suggests that this monolingualism is preventing them from doing well. So instead of emerging them and assimilating them into this mainstream culture of English, of dominant United States society, which we could say many things for, but we won't, it's stripping them of a lot of the abilities that they naturally have to succeed. So instead of holding them up, this monolingual ideology is holding them back. So in my opinion, what is needed is studies and policies focusing on what teachers can do to accommodate ELL students. So more studies about what strategies and tips are working for ELL students. Teachers need to be prepared in order to help their students, and they need to have the tools and the tricks and the skills to do it. So all of those things that teachers are saying, I don't have the time for, we still need them. They're helping students survive. But what also needs to be done is research on not just what why is that a hard word to say right now? So instead of just focusing on what we can do right and what we are doing right, we also need to focus on what we're doing wrong in schools. And in order to do that, we really need to examine ourselves and examine our school structures and really look at it with a critical eye. It's not going to be easy. Of course it's not going to be easy, but maybe if we start looking at what we've gotten wrong, we can start correcting the problems that we see. And that is all for me. Thank you for sticking it out. I know that was not the shortest presentation ever, so thanks for being awesome, guys. Bye.